Hello and welcome to Exchange with Mark Eddo. I'm Mark Eddo, and this is our fabulous new studio in the heart of London. On this show, you'll meet millionaires, musicians, mavericks, and decision makers. Fascinating people you'll really want to hear from.
Each and every one of us must change the way we do things.
The really exciting countries in our view are three: Ethiopia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Kenya.
It's important that companies don't just go and say we're just talking to government, but also understand what the citizenry of the country is looooking for.
You're a welder.
Yes.
A woman welder.
Yes, woman welder.
Woman welder.
I love Lagos. I feel freer in Lagos.
From Nigeria to Kenya, down to South Africa, the whole continent is facing challenging economic times. So, what can African businesses do to weather the storm? Well, let's ask two of Africa's leading business thinkers. Rob Herzog is the CEO and founder of Invest Africa, and Rosalind Kenya is the managing director of Kina Advisory. Welcome.
Thank you.
My two gurus here. Let me start with you, Rosalind. You're advising companies, not just here in the UK, but around the world, on the opportunities that exist in Africa. What are you telling them?
Well, I'm advising companies more about the political, the social, and the socioeconomic context in which they're going to operate in.
You're demystifying it then?
Exactly, because I think leaders of nations are quite keen for their citizens to actually vote them in. And therefore, the leaders are listening to what their citizens want. And I think it's therefore important that companies don't just go and say we're just talking to government, but also understand what the citizenry of the country is looking for.
And I guess from an investor perspective, you're probably doing something very much like that. You're saying you can't just go in, set up shop, make profit. It's a lot more than that.
But in a lot of cases, we're talking to people that haven't yet invested in Africa. And they're the most interesting ones because they look at this continent of 54 countries and there's a big question mark. So we try to synthesize the investable opportunities in Africa as quickly as possible, country, sector, and the ones we like.
How do you do that?
Well, there are 54 countries. We think there are 15 or 16 really investable countries.
So you focus down on 15 or 16?
Correct. The really exciting countries in our view are three: Ethiopia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Kenya. Those are our three favorites. And then it's sector by sector, clearly.
Let's reverse this for a second, Rosalind. Let's look at it from the perspective of a CEO sitting in any of these countries that wants to connect to these investors that Rob speaks of. They not just for money, not just for investment, but also for expertise and for capacity. How do they ready themselves? Because it really is a beauty parade, I'd say.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and it's a very important point. And I think a lot of African CEOs believe that, particularly with the whole local content issue now quite in the fore, believe that being citizens of their countries makes them ready. But that's not quite true. I think it's everything from their business processes right through to, I mean, I'll even go down to say things like HR and making sure that you have a proper management process, a proper succession planning process in place, because an investor coming in doesn't want to just depend on you, say the founder CEO, which is the case in most African companies, wants to make sure that if you're not there, or when you move on, there is actually a management system there and a proper management body that can take on and continue what you're doing. A lot of these companies are still just starting up, no matter what size they are. And it's therefore difficult to immediately adopt international standards and use them as are. So we advise on how you can adapt them and over time just build up that expertise, build up your standards and processes to international standards so that you are attractive to investors.
So for me as a CEO, it's about reducing red flags. But first of all, I have to recognize what is a red flag to a foreign investor, right?
Absolutely.
It's making yourself investable. And as Rosalind says, there are a lot of factors involved because when we discover a company, and usually discover a company that needs between 2, 3, and 10 or $15 million, because any bigger, they've created the systems and the structure, and the private equity guys have their eyes on them. But under that radar screen is an extraordinary founder or family and a great product or service that's beginning to penetrate a market. And that's the most exciting time to find them. But for investors, they need to be investable. And what it means is corporatized. It's a terrible word, but you know what I mean. They have to have an accounting firm that's got at least 3 or 4 years of proper accounting standards, proper governance. You know, all of those things need to be in place before someone can actually invest on a sensible basis.
What about this point that you make about family-run businesses? Because one of the things we're not very good at in Africa, I always feel, is succession. We're not good at it in politics, and we're not very good at it in business. Now, when you have a family-run business that everything is revolving almost like a monarchy with the big CEO, you know, it's one guy. You pull that guy out or he retires, and then, you know, from an investor, if I were an investor, I'd be worried about succession.
Absolutely.
Interestingly, the issue here is not so much the founder, because the founder's obviously done something extraordinary. And there's usually a good managing director or finance director. It's the next level down. And Africa does lack a lot of skills at that level. You have probably good literacy skills, but very weak financial skills. So we often find that the next level down or the second level down of management is where the real stress takes place in a company, especially if they're growing or expanding.
We need a lot more technical people, you know, and I think we need to begin to make known that the technical and vocational skills are very important for the future. And that as a plumber, you don't just have to be the plumber who's working for a company. You can be a plumber who's beginning to set up your own plumbing company and hire other people and begin to make yourself, again, ready for international investors who are coming in, who are looking for the type of welders, plumbers, technicians, electricians that are needed. I think that's very important.
Rob, companies pay you tens of thousands of dollars to advise on where to invest. We're paying you nothing but we're still asking you, where's the smart money going?
The smart money, look, there's still a lot of investment in telecoms and extractive industries. I think, you know, probably over 50% go into those two sectors in Africa. But increasingly, the smart money is looking at anything focused at the consumer.
Absolutely.
Because
fast-moving consumer
all the trends in Africa are heading in the right direction. Governance, literacy, infant mortality going down. There are very few wars in Africa. Things are looking up.
And a young population.
So the consumer market really excites me. And whether that you know, is nappies or hair products or you know, fast foods, that's where the action is.
They call you optimistic, both of you.
Optimistic.
Absolutely.
I'm a believer.
Yes, absolutely optimistic.
Rob Herzog, Rosalind Kenya, thank you for joining us on Exchange with Mark Eddo. Now, imagine you have the task of speaking on behalf of 186 million people. That's exactly what Nigeria's Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, has to do every day. Alhaji Lai Mohammed, the Minister of Information and Culture of Nigeria. It's a pleasure to have you here in front of me on Exchange with Mark Eddo.
Thank you, my brother.
Now, we're facing tough times at the moment. Nobody will deny that these are difficult times. And you're right at the epicenter. What is driving you? What is your aim and your goal, you think, singularly?
This is the most challenging time for anybody to assume leadership of Nigeria. I'm sure if many of us knew how rotten the situation was, or if we knew the kind of challenge we are going to face, probably some would have declined to be minister. But this is the right time for any selfless patriot to really come and pull Nigeria out of this mess. I think over time, Nigerians have learned not to trust any government.
It's not surprising, though.
Over times, Nigerians have looked at every public office who hold them, especially ministers, governors, commissioners, as parasites. Now, unfortunately today, there's nothing to parasite. The blood is dry. There's nothing for them to suck. And you must reinvent yourself. You must really see this as a mission. If we don't do it, Nigeria will be sunk. But we have been able to, put in place the Treasury single account. We're able to introduce, efficiency units in government. We've cut down the cost of governance. We're able to weed out about 33,000 ghost workers. And then we've also come out with a strategic document on how we are going to achieve 34 objectives, ranging from the ease of doing business to, import substitution to, diversification of the economy.
I wanted to ask you, what is your plan to orientate Nigerians and bring them together as one?
When Nigerians voted for our party in 2015, our mantra was change. And Nigerians believe they voted for change. However, we want Nigerians to understand that that change they're asking for will not come about until and when they start doing things in a different way. There must be a paradigm shift in the way they do things. That's why we have tagged our campaign, Change Begins With Me.
Change begins with me.
Me, yeah. And it's a way of letting Nigerians know that each and every one of us must change the way we do things. For instance, if you're a pharmacist, you must stop from today from selling adulterated drugs. Change begins with you. If you're a student, you must believe in hard work and not cultism. Change begins with you. Nigerians they are very intelligent. You cannot preach change to Nigerians if you don't change yourself. If a minister, for instance, should get to the airport, jump the queue, and go straight to the top of the line, he can't preach change. They won't believe him.
That's
but
true.
believe me, if you see a minister on the queue with yourself, then they say that change has actually.
Yeah, it has a profound effect.
Change begins with me.
Yes.
Now, so I think it's so simple. It's so easy, but you must lead by example.
It's essential.
Yes, very.
And it's a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you very much.
Alhaji Lai Mohammed, Minister of Information and Culture.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, you may have been wondering what these amazing objects behind me are. Well, they're the creations of Sokari Douglas-Camp. Welcome.
Thank you.
I love her. What's her name?
Her name is Flora.
What influenced you to create such a magnificent creature?
Botticelli's painting, Primavera.
Now, she's welded, right? So that's
she's
what
welded.
you do. You're a welder.
Yes.
A woman welder.
Yes, woman welder.
Woman welder. Where did that come from?
I had to make structures for kinetic sculptures, and I had to make these kind of frames. So I learned how to weld when I was in doing my BA. I have sheets of steel, and I'm inspired by daily life.
Let's move over here. Tell me about this piece here. What's this called, and what is he doing to her?
Oh, he's definitely whispering wonderful things to her. And the thing is that they've got a forest with the same sort of leaves going up around them with plants that are recognisable from the painting as well.
And she's whispering to her as well.
Yes, one of them has cheeks like Miles Davis because she's really
Miles Davis would have loved that.
targeting
So what
the
inspires
ladies
you?
here.
Where do you see these pictures in your mind, and then where does it come from?
It comes from daily life, I suppose, looking at myself, because I'm an African woman and I like to see myself in places, and it amuses me that, you can talk about situations and place them in an African context, I guess. So it amuses me to do these things by, having slightly flared noses and gilly signature and perk breasts, which have nothing to do with me, but I'm trying to make a picture, and you can do so just because of all the influences that are around.
Sokari's work has been shown at the 154 Contemporary Art Fair in London. 154 is the biggest annual exhibition that promotes artists, galleries and curators of African art. And here joining me and Sokari is the founding director of 154, Toria El Glaoui. Welcome.
Hello.
Now, what inspired you to create a contemporary African arts fair?
Well, it came from two different backgrounds. First, I'm the daughter of an artist called Hassan El Glaoui.
Yes.
And I think growing up in Morocco, in a place where my first contact with art was my father, really, helped me, get my first art education. Working later on something called the Catalogue Raisonné for him, really also underlined how important his career in Paris and in Europe was, and before he came back to Morocco and started his career again.
And I understand that Winston Churchill advised your father to become an artist.
Yes, actually he had a bigger role than this. He convinced my grandfather to let my father go paint abroad, in Les Beaux-Arts in Paris, because as a son of a leader or a tribe leader, he didn't expect my dad to have any artistic vocation, and he wanted him to be some kind of warrior himself. So he had a bit of help of Winston Churchill, who said that my dad was talented enough to be able to go to Paris and study art.
What is the condition or the climate for African art now? We saw Sokari's wonderful work there. For artists like that, and many of the, especially the artists that are coming up, is it a very or more receptive world out there for them?
Well, I think it's a very positive outlook in general. I think what you have to put back into context is that in Africa there's a lot of structures that are not existent for artists. So there's not so many museums, there's not so many art centers or galleries. So depending where you are traveling in Africa, you'll see, depending on the artistic scene that is developed or not.
If I wanted to create an African art collection, what would you advise me as an artist, as a collector, to do? How would I start? And what?
Buy my work.
Buy your work to begin with. You hear that? Buy her work.
Buy my work.
No. What would I do? I mean, what should I follow? My instincts?
I would just definitely tell you to buy what you like first. That's what should be the first criteria, because you're going to be seeing that piece for quite a long time. Then if it's an investment, do a lot of research, in terms of, are you going to keep it, for how long, and if you want to invest. I'm like completely against it, but, a lot of people buy for future investment. So they buy now with the hope to sell, which I think is very, very sad.
Why is that a shame? I mean, that's sort of,
you're not buying it
that sounds
because you love it.
intelligent.
I mean, usually it talks to me, so I have a very difficult, engagement with the art. I don't do it with I know I want to see the piece when I wake up, like I will make sure that it's a piece that actually I really want. And I mean, honestly, even the people who invested in emerging artists, there's very limited amount of people that bet on the right one that, made a fortune, 5 years later. So you actually really need to buy something that will fit. Maybe you have a different angle in terms of what kind of collection you want to build. I think the best advice is like buy something you like.
Toria, Sokari, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
On my recent trip back home to Nigeria, my sources on the ground told me that one of my favorite artists, Asa, was in town, working on her latest album. I caught up with her. I'm here with Asa. Asa, I love you.
Oh.
And I love your music.
Thank you.
I really do.
Thank
and
you.
it's great to finally sit down, because this is the first interview we've ever done together. Personally, your music always speaks to me. Now, I want to talk about your music for a second, but we're both Lagosians. So I want to see what your relationship is with Lagos. Do you love Lagos?
I do. I love Lagos. I always look forward to coming to Lagos. And it's home, it's familiar. It's where I feel free. I feel freer in Lagos than I do elsewhere in the world.
Taxis waiting down on the street, so hurry up, I have to go. Looking round, you see all the people making faces very cold. Carry me away, far from the circles that never breaks.
One of the things I really like about your music is that you convey such deep messages, but you don't do it with a hammer, you almost do it with a feather. Is that done subconsciously, or is it done consciously?
I always try to be the listener. I try to put myself in the chair of the listener, and I ask myself, what would you gain by pointing fingers? I think Bob Marley.
I was just about to say.
He is one of my inspiration because he is very subtle, and his message is still. Is still on forever. I would like to do that. Fela also is my.
But Fela had a harder.
Fela was hard, and I think he suffered a lot for that. But we'll never forget him because he paved the way for people like me. So I had to, find a good balance between the two.
Please don't tell me you're falling, 'cause I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Please don't tell me you love me, 'cause I've been waiting for the one who never comes.
Where do you think you get your inspiration best from? Pleasure or pain?
Pain. I write better when I'm sad. I write a different song when I'm happy. And you heard that on the second album. I was happy, and I think I dropped a big bag from my first album. I discovered that, oh, you could do this as a girl. Oh, you could do it. You could wear skirts. Nice. So it was different.
You grew up here. You were born in France, but you got here very young, 2 years old or so, and grew up in a Muslim household. I'm amazed you were able to be allowed to sing actually in a Muslim household.
Actually, I wasn't. I wasn't. I had to. I had a little room, and that was away from the main house, and then I had a radio. That radio was everything for me.
But you couldn't play any instruments or anything?
No, but then one day I got so angry, I went to the market, took my school fees, and bought me a guitar.
Oh, is that how you bought your first guitar?
That was how I got, and it was a crappy guitar, but I sang, I wrote.
You probably wore that guitar
more
out.
than 10 songs. And when I would, go on the street, I would just hang it without a case because I didn't have money for it. Everyone, even the neighbors, they'll see me with my guitar, my bagless guitar, and you could hear them talking. It's just like,
Look at this one,
are you
basically.
serious? Why?
But despite that, you kept going.
Oh,
what do you think made you? Is it the little girl in you?
Guitar was my AK-47 because I thought the guitar was what would take me out.
Do you know what? It's not your father when you become older that dictates your emotions, what you do. It's the child within you. And for you, it was that little girl with the guitar is still in you. I hope you look after her.
I hope. But, and it's nice that you've mentioned that, really. I really should look after her because she has taken me through tough times. She's given me courage and and helped me out of tiny spaces.
She's always been there.
And she's made me really feel more than this.
Ayo, 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 ayo. Well, the children run around, just laughing in the crowd. I hope it still remains the same.
Finally, what are you doing next? Tell me, you're working on an album.
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah. What's it going to be called?
I don't know.
Give me an exclusive. You don't know yet?
I don't know. It's a lot of it's mixed emotions. I need to be a dreamer. So I'm fighting every day, every morning when I wake up and go to write.
I started the interview by saying the thing I'll end with, Asha, I love you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.